We accidentally became fund launching experts over the past 6 years, and today we'll tell you the story of how it all happened. So in January of 2019, I found myself at the JW Marriott Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. I was there for the first ever Opportunity Zone Expo. It was a huge investor event. And what happened at this event actually ended up transforming my entire career. We'll get back to that in a minute. But first, welcome to Fund Playbook. This is a show that's all about how to launch and raise capital for your very own private fund or real estate syndication. My name is Jimmy Atkinson. I'm joined today by my longtime friend and business partner, Andy Hagans. Andy, it's great to see you. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Jimmy, and I'm excited to be here. The big launch day that we've been working towards is finally here.
Yeah, that's right. This is officially the first ever episode of Fund Playbook. We're launching it today at the end of January 2025. It's been a long time coming. Before we dive in, just a few notes about our plan for this show. Fund Playbook is a show that's all about how to launch and raise capital for your very own private fund or real estate syndication. And we're going to be releasing new episodes of this show every single week. But it's more than just a show. We're not just a show. We're also building a community of like-minded entrepreneurs, and you're invited to join us here. We want this community to be interactive, and we want to get your feedback and answer your questions in real time right here on this show. So we'll be going live every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern time starting today. Now, moving on to today's topic, how Andy and I accidentally became fund launching experts. And Andy, I think we need to rewind a little bit and give a little story of us, the history of our backstory, how we started working together over 20 years ago. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And some of our audience probably know, but most of you don't. Jimmy and I were college roommates at the University of Notre Dame. And I guess it's cliche, but we started our first business together as business partners in our dorm room. And then one business led to another. And then we entered the financial media space after we graduated and had our first big success there. But I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later. But Jimmy, you and I have really, since college, worked together, both in private equity and startups in this financial space. But why don't we fast forward to what you alluded to, which is your career really took a slightly different trajectory starting about 6 years ago. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. It was at that big investor event that I hinted at almost exactly 6 years ago to the day. It was late January 2019. It was the big and very first ever Opportunity Zone Expo. And I want to get to that in a minute. But actually, just to rewind 6 months prior to that, is when I launched Opportunity DB, which eventually became OpportunityZones.com. And what that platform is a marketplace that's designed to match up investors with fund sponsors and deal sponsors that are raising capital for alternative investment products, namely through the Opportunity Zone tax incentive. And I was toiling away, Andy, every day at building this website from about late July, early August of 2018, all the way through to the start of today's episode when I referenced January of 2019. But I didn't really know how successful it was going to be. And I didn't really know how big the opportunity was because I was just slaving away in my office day in, day out, hours a day on my computer, building a website, putting together content on what this new investment product was all about, how investors can get involved, the enormous tax breaks associated with this program. But when I walked into that JW Marriott Hotel in January of 2019, I was blown away. And it was then that I knew, wow, this thing is huge. Because let me paint a picture for you, Andy. I'm not sure what to expect when I walked into this hotel in downtown Los Angeles in January of 2019. I was really new. I didn't know anybody. I was pretty nervous. I didn't know what to wear. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know who I was going to talk to, who I was going to meet. I didn't know how many people were going to be there. I just knew that I had to be there because it was the first event in this very brand new industry. And I walked into the ballroom and I was immediately blown away by just how big the thing was. There were hundreds and hundreds of people there. The event organizers underestimated how many people would be in attendance. And there was also just a palpable excitement in the room about this brand new industry, Andy.
Yeah. And Jimmy, it's interesting because you and I, we've generally worked in private equity and finance really our entire careers, but opportunity zones, and we don't need to get, too deep into what that tax break is. Suffice it to say, it's a tax break involving real estate investing, or at least most of the investments are real estate investments. And I remember talking to you about it, and I didn't even know what opportunity zones were, but you were telling me, and I was like, wait, so you're basically working in the real estate industry now, or the, the alts industry, the alternative investment industry? And you were like, yeah. And I was like, huh, real estate, really? You know?
Yeah, exactly, Andy. And from there, opportunityzones.com grew by leaps and bounds. We've hosted over a dozen different virtual events for investors to meet up with product sponsors or real estate investment project sponsors who are raising capital for their deals. So we essentially have formed the marketplace where funds raising capital or syndicators raising capital can match up with our huge audience of investors. And that's really why I started opportunityzones.com in the first place, was to provide a lot of education about this brand new incentive program, this brand new asset class, some people were calling it at the time, and to make sure that investment dollars actually did flow in, because the marketplace is rather opaque otherwise. And over the months and years that followed, over the next 6 years, we rolled out more and more features on the website. We started a podcast. We started an event series, OZ Pitch Day. We've hosted over a dozen of those now that really helps drive a lot of investment dollars into different projects all over the country. We have a mastermind group called OZ Insiders, and we also spun off into a non-OZ platform called Alts Expo, which we hosted several events on that platform as well, Andy.
Yeah, and Jimmy, not to make it about me, but that, at some point, in the first couple of years, you called me just to bounce some ideas off me, and one thing led to another. I came alongside you to help you scale the opportunityzones.com platform, as well as the Alts Expo event series. And so my story is really kind of similar in that I got involved in this alternative investment space. I mean, I'd worked in private equity, but more just as a GP, and not really thinking about the fundraising side of it, right? But just little by little, we learned more and more about the real estate industry. But more than that, so you became an expert by talking with and helping and consulting for all of these alternative investment private funds over a period of several years. And you acquired all this technical knowledge, and then you started a mastermind group, OZ Insiders, this premium community for people to gather and learn. But you kept running into the same, I guess, questions over and over. And you realize, I think there's a need even beyond this specific tax break, but just a need for community around how to start a private fund, or how does this industry work from the GP's point of view, from the fund manager's point of view. Is that right?
That's right, Andy. And really, two things happened after that January 19 event at that expo in downtown Los Angeles. One is I went from being an attendee at these conferences where I was kind of nervous and a little bit shy, and I didn't know what to say to people, and I was just kind of trying to soak up as much knowledge as I could, to over the years that transpired after that, I slowly became a leading expert in this industry that I was only just following really in January 2019, to the point where I have now been invited to speak at those conferences, and I'm looked at as an authority figure in the space. I never could have imagined that happening, but it has happened. I am one of the, and opportunityzones.com, that platform is probably one of the most authoritative platforms in that industry. The second thing that happened, Andy, was I met a lot of people along the way, a lot of really important, powerful people, both inside of Washington, some policymakers, and then all around the country, just different professionals working on different fundraisers, different entrepreneurs, and also different professional services members, accountants, attorneys, consultants, all trying to build up this opportunity zone industry from the ground up, essentially. And we've done a lot of great work along the way. But I realized, Andy, that after consulting with dozens, and actually well over 100 different entrepreneurs who were trying to get started with their opportunity zone fund and their opportunity zone capital raising that a lot of what I was learning, a lot of what I was teaching them, a lot of the knowledge that I had built up wasn't confined solely to opportunity zones, right? It was more about just being an entrepreneur, starting a fund the right way, marketing the fund, raising capital for the fund, ongoing fund management. And it dawned on me, I'm working in this really awesome sandbox that is opportunity zones, but there's a whole big world out there that I think can use the knowledge that you and I have gained over the last several years, Andy.
Yeah, and Jimmy, not just you and I, because like what we found is so many people get stuck. So many entrepreneurs get stuck on the same types of, like, there's just certain things that they get stuck on in terms
Yes.
of launching a fund or syndication. And a lot of them are independently solving all of these problems and coming up with processes. And it's like, but wouldn't it be great if we could kind of talk with each other and share this knowledge, and it just making it easier for everybody who's in the community?
That's exactly right, Andy. And that's why I say, I started Opportunity DB, which eventually became opportunityzones.com in the summer of 2018. I had that huge aha moment, that inflection point at that in-person conference in January of 2019. I wasn't thinking during that time, and I wasn't even thinking for the several years after, that I was developing what I ended up developing, which is essentially a fund playbook. It's a playbook for entrepreneurs to follow if they're looking to start their own private fund or real estate syndication. But I've since realized that that is what we have here. We have a bunch of acquired knowledge and expertise working in this industry over the past 6+ years. And we have a lot of contacts in the industry that we've built up over the past 6+ years. So really, that's why I started Fund Playbook, Andy. And really, that's a lot about me, Andy. I've hogged the microphone for the first several minutes of this podcast, but I want the audience to learn a bit more about you now. And as you mentioned at the top of the show, you and I have known each other for a long time. We were college roommates. We've been business partners for over 20 years. But where did your career start?
Yeah, so again, Jimmy, it really started University of Notre Dame when I was your roommate, and we just started building websites and doing stuff on the internet, right? And one startup led to another. Really, my whole career, though, I've done a lot of different startups. I've made a lot of different private equity investments, but almost all of my success has been in the intersection of marketing and finance. So really, those are the topics, the industries that I'm the most passionate about. And you and I, our first big win in our careers, I think, or one of our first big wins, was when we created ETF Database with a third business partner, Michael Johnston. And we, along with him, scaled ETF Database to be the largest independent media covering exchange traded funds in the United States. And this was in like 2010, 2011. The industry was already big, but it was like a lot smaller than it is now. It was in that like really exciting phase when ETFs were really displacing mutual funds and becoming the thing. We ended up selling that company. We got some nice chunk of cash and some stock, which the stock later did really well. And that kind of set the stage for us to be lifelong entrepreneurs working in private equity and startups. And so I've done that ever since. More recently, came alongside you, invested in and worked with you on opportunityzones.com platform, as well as the Alts Expo event series. And that's really where I got the real estate bug. Because like I said, when I first called you and we were talking about the Opportunity Zones tax break, it was really a tax break that is very relevant to real estate. I was like, wait a minute. So you're investing in real estate, or you're involved in real estate now? And it was just nothing that you or I had really ever worked in before. But little by little, talking with so many fund managers and operators and just all of the passion and energy in the alternative investment space and the real estate space, I think really rubbed off on me. And obviously the passion rubbed off on me because I became passionate and decided, I want to do another private equity company. So I launched Mastiff Equity Partners last year. We did our first acquisition here in Michigan, and we're focused on retail assets. So I can't, I guess, overstate how excited I am about alternative investments. And I find it's one of those things, Jimmy, you and I talk about it, and then we wonder, like, are we just nerds who are into this and it's not really that exciting to other people? But I have found that, people when they ask me like what I do, if I bring up alts or real estate, like people get excited. There's a ton of excitement in this space right now.
Yeah, there definitely is. I think my kids think I'm a big nerd, and they know that you're a big nerd, Andy. But I think there are a lot of entrepreneurs out there, are people, real estate entrepreneurs and private equity entrepreneurs who are truly passionate about this and excited about this. Hey, I'm glad to hear that I rubbed off on you a little bit. Maybe I played a small role in developing the idea in your head for Mastiff Equity Partners. Before that, though, you used to host a different podcast under our Alts Expo brand that was very successful, the Alternative Investment Podcast. What were some of your takeaways from hosting that show?
Well, yeah. So Jimmy, I hosted that show for several years to promote our alternative investment events business. And basically, 9 out of 10 guests on the show were alternative investment fund managers, right? And then along with other kind of industry experts, industry participants. Um, what I guess what really excited me was, you learn that there are all these private funds. And when you first get into the world of alts, you're like, this is overwhelming. There's so many asset classes. How could I possibly learn about all of this? Like, let alone to have enough confidence to like invest in all these different alternative investments. You speak to each fund manager and you realize, they have their niche, they have their thing. It might be value add multifamily. It might be lower middle market private credit, right? It could be any kind of real estate or any other kind of alternative investment space. And so it's just exciting to find out, what each entrepreneur is good at. And like a lot of times it's just like this very narrow niche, but like that's okay. Because when you have a fund that's in a narrow niche, there's always investors that are focused on that narrow niche. So that was exciting. But one thing I learned I think we had 170 or something, close to 200 episodes that I published and interviews that I did, was that a lot of the fund managers were really, really good at their thing. And then they also tended to sometimes struggle, or their company struggled with the same set of issues, which is maybe like, I'm really good at managing assets and creating value in this asset class, but I don't really know how to market it. I don't know how to tell my story. Or sometimes, in like the mastermind group, we would talk with entrepreneurs and they're like, again, I know what I'm doing. I know how to put a deal together. But what's kind of tripping me up is, how do I get started making this legal in terms of, filing with the SEC and raising capital? So, you and I kind of discussed this. It's interesting that people so much smarter than me, in my opinion, would still get like stuck on these little things. And it's like, these things, they're not rocket science to figure out. We would consult with people. We would help them figure those things out. But at the same time, they're not like natural forms of they're not the type of knowledge that you would just naturally stumble on, right? They're things you have to learn by experience.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Andy. And I think a lot of those people that you ended up interviewing, like you said, they're very smart. They know how to put a deal together. They're probably far more expertise than you or I could be in certain asset classes. But when it comes to structuring a fund, right, or raising capital for the fund, maybe it's putting together the pitch deck, maybe it's putting together the financial projections, maybe it's the legal stuff. They just get tripped up. And I think that's absolutely right.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was always, to be honest, like the first time that a fund manager was asking me for my opinion or for advice on raising capital or marketing or whatever, or in your case, how do I structure a fund, or how should I file with the SEC, et cetera. I was almost confused. Like, well, wait, you're a lot smarter than me. Like, why are you asking me? But then I realized, it's one of those things where you get enough repetitions and you just start to become more and more familiar with it, right? Like, Jimmy, you see 300 pitch decks for alternative investment funds, and you start to notice patterns, like what makes a good pitch deck. And even at our investor events, like you can literally see in real time what pitch decks are and what stories are pulling people in versus what aren't really hitting the crowd very well. So you notice these patterns, and it's like, there's none of it is rocket science, but at the same time, it's so hard to go out and launch a fund or do a real estate syndication on your own. Like, I think ipso facto, just like by virtue of what it is you're doing, you have to assemble a team, because putting together a fund or a real estate syndication is multidisciplinary, right? It involves so many little tiny different tasks, and there's just no way that someone is going to be good at all of them, right? So it's our goal, number one, to break down what is that step-by-step process. Like, in other words, this show, I think it's going to talk about, like, at the end of the day, what is that checklist that you need to do if you want to put together a fund, an offering, a syndication to scale what it is you're doing, and then how do you assemble a team to help facilitate that? Because Jimmy, the team, is obviously so important in real estate deals, in alternative investment space, in putting together a fund. But I want to bring it back to, Jimmy, this show, because we're excited about this show. We're excited about the year ahead. This is our very first episode. So today we're just kind of explaining what we're planning and who we are, to give people a little bit of background. But what are you planning to cover on this show in the future?
Yeah, well, we've already hinted at a few of the topics, I think, Andy, and I'll go into more detail on several of the topics here in just a minute. Basically, we're going to talk about everything you should know before you launch your own private fund or real estate syndication. And if you already launched your own private fund or real estate syndication and you're stuck, we'll talk about everything you should know still. But I'll just list off a few topics that we're going to plan to cover over the next several episodes. And you've already mentioned a few of these, Andy, but asset classes, you mentioned that, how to pick the right niche for you. There's so many asset classes in the investing universe, the alternative investment universe in particular. I mean, even within real estate, Andy, there's multifamily, there's office, there's industrial, there's retail, there's numerous more. And then even if you want to drill down into just multifamily, there's student housing, senior housing, there's core plus, value add. I mean, there's so many different investment strategies that you can pick that maybe you have already found is kind of your niche. But if you need help, we're going to lay it all out for you. Here is the entire universe of alternative investment products. By the way, that's just real estate, not to mention private equity, not to mention infrastructure, energy, all that stuff. There's so much out there that you can specialize in. We'll also talk about the type of team that you need. Andy, you just stressed the importance of this. This is a multidisciplinary thing. Starting your own fund, raising capital for your own fund. You need to be good at identifying the niche, at that investment thesis. You need to have that honed in. You need to be an expert in accounting. You need to be an expert in the law. You need to be an expert in marketing. No, that's not true, actually. You don't need to be an expert in all those things. You just need to have the team in place. You need the right members of your team that have the know-how in those various disciplines.
Yeah, and Jimmy, just to interject, because I know we have some people listening to this who are just total beginners. We haven't, or at least let me ask you. I can speak for myself. Having interviewed over 100 fund managers for the Alternative Investment Podcast and spoken and consulted with so many of them for Alt Expo events, none of them do it all. None of them know it all. And in fact, probably the ones that I put on like the highest pedestal, that I'm like, wow, that guy is really impressive, or that woman is very impressive. I don't want to say they outsource the most, but like they rely so heavily on their teams and kind of know, like, okay, this is my lane. This is what I'm good at. This is where I create the most value. And then now it's all about putting together the team, because forget about a fund, even like a real estate deal, like nobody does the whole thing alone, right? Like you have to have all of this expert help, whether it's with maintenance or your attorney or the survey or whatever, just even a deal. You're already used to putting together a team. The fund is no different, right? All of these successful, big, from the smallest to the largest, most successful managers, they have a team. Nobody's doing it all by themselves.
That's exactly right, Andy. It's kind of like a football team, right? An NFL football team. Think of yourself, if you're the entrepreneur starting the fund, you're the general manager, but you might need to get a head coach. And then your coaching staff, it's not just the head coach. He needs an offensive coordinator. He needs a defensive coordinator. You need somebody to handle ticket sales. You need somebody to handle the stadium. The GM never does it all, right? There's so much that you need, so many different team members you need. And depending on how large your fund is, if you're raising money for a $1 million apartment building, maybe you need a smaller team than somebody raising money for a $500 million multi-asset fund, but still you're going to need a lot of the same, some of the same expertises in place, Andy. So beyond the team, we're also going to talk about how fund sponsors or deal syndicators make money, because I don't think anybody listening to the show is doing this because they're feeling charitable and they're going to just build apartments and retail centers out of the kindness of their heart. That's certainly part of it, by the way. Part of it is fulfilling some sort of social need, some sort of capitalist need as well, right? People need a place to live. People need a place to shop. People need this business that you're starting, right? But you want to make money at the end of the day. You want a profit. So how do fund sponsors and deal syndicators make money with fees, sponsor promotes, and so on and so forth? We'll cover that topic extensively. We'll also talk about how to legally structure a fund and how to file a fund with the SEC, because if you are non-compliant, if you're raising capital from outside investors that you don't know, and you're non-compliant with SEC rules, you can be subject to not just civil penalties, but also criminal penalties. People have been put in jail before, and I don't want to scare anybody off the get-go. It's easy enough to comply if you know what you're doing and you have the right team members in place, but it's crucially important, isn't it, Andy, to make sure that you're compliant with the SEC?
Absolutely. And I mean, it's literally maybe our number one issue maybe that we've run into, Jimmy. I mean, you'll have to tell me your experience with this, but well, two things. First, I want to stress that these are sophisticated fund managers. So when I'm telling this anecdote, I'm not talking about like ignorant people. Like these are people running successful companies with successful funds, but they'll come to us and maybe they'll be doing a capital raise for a new fund, and they're looking for assistance, whether they want to sponsor one of our events, or just talk with us about marketing or fundraising strategy. And our first question to them is, okay, is this offering 506B or 506C? And how many times have we heard on the other end of the Zoom call, yeah, I'm not sure. Need to talk with our attorney about it. And like, that's a very basic thing. It's a very important thing. And by the way, we're definitely going to talk about that specific question. If you launch a fund or syndication, how should you file it, 506B versus 506C versus something else? But just, it's amazing, Jimmy, just even very sophisticated managers, they don't have that basic information. And so what we're trying to do is break it down, make it as simple as we can, and make it accessible to everybody who watches the show.
Yeah, I would say that's been the biggest surprise to me working in this industry for the last several years, Andy, is that there does just seem to be a general, not misunderstanding, just lack of understanding of the difference between SEC filings and even within, at the top of the fund, the managing director of some funds or some real estate syndications don't even really understand how they have filed with the SEC, and why it's important, Andy. And this is another topic we'll cover, is because how you file with the SEC determines on how you're legally able to take your fund offering to the marketplace, whether or not you're able to advertise to the general public, or if you have to only market the fund to pre-existing relationships or to shop it around with financial professionals. So we'll talk all about that within the confines of this show and at the Fund Playbook platform. We'll also discuss, once you are out to market and you're raising capital, how do you find your first investor, and how do you close your first investor? Because so much about putting together a good fund is, one, having a good deal, two, having it structured properly, three, having it filed properly with the SEC, but then four, how do you find the investors and how do you close them? How do you actually bring capital in? We'll also talk about ongoing investor relations and a whole lot more, Andy.
I love it. And Jimmy, one thing I want to stress about the show and the format, which really comes from some other shows that we've enjoyed, is we're doing it as a live stream. And the reason we're doing it as a live stream is we want the community interaction, right? So Jimmy, as you kind of went down that list of all of these topics that we're going to cover, but we really want to address topics from our audience that our audience is, facing right now. So we're doing it as the live stream so that you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, show up at, the time and place. The place is YouTube, right? Our channel, and ask your questions, getting them answered in real time. Because, Jimmy, if you and I just do this in a vacuum and we try and, answer the questions that we think people have, I think that sometimes that's where this kind of content can go wrong. I'd much rather hear from you, the listener, the viewer. What problem are you having right now? What question do you have right now? And so make this show a very community driven show.
Yeah, that's right, Andy. It's been a big success for us on the platform that I've mentioned previously, opportunityzones.com. We do weekly office hours, or monthly office hours, I should say. And we also have a monthly live news show, Andy, and we get a ton of back and forth from our very engaged audience there. So that's really important. I think you're absolutely right, Andy. I don't want to assume what the audience wants. I want to hear from the audience directly. So if you ever have a question about, maybe you have already started a real estate syndication and you're stuck on something, or maybe you're thinking about starting a syndication or a private fund, whether it's in real estate or a non-real estate venture, come to us, ask your question. We're here every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern time live, and our door is open. Basically, we'll open up the comments and we'll answer as many questions as we can. Right, Andy?
Absolutely. So again, we want to invite everybody to join the community. Right, this is going to be better and more fun for us, frankly. The larger and more engaged the community is. So we're going to do that live on YouTube, and then we're also going to publish it after the fact. So if you miss a live stream, no problem. You can always listen to it retroactively with the recording. So that'll be published on audio platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, as well as on YouTube. And Jimmy, I think we'll also probably have like an email address. I don't know if we've even set it up yet, but where people can email their questions if they know, well, I can't make the live stream, but I wanted to ask about X, Y, or Z topic. So we really want to make an effort to answer the questions that people have and to build up the community around Fund Playbook.
That's right, Andy. The best place to find us is here on our YouTube channel. But Andy, we do have an email address set up. It's info@fundplaybook.com. Our website is under construction, but it's looking better every day. Fundplaybook.com. Head over there. And Andy, you're right. We are going to publish all of our live streams within the next day as audio only on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, everywhere else where podcasts can be listened to. But and it'll also be available on YouTube to watch after the fact. But I really hope as many people as possible can join us live, because it's always better with a live audience. It's better with that interactive back and forth. Andy, I'm really excited, man. I think this is going to be a great show. I'm actually more excited now than I was a half an hour ago before we started just talking with you about all this stuff. It's been great. It's got the gears turning in my head. I hope you feel the same way.
Right back at you. Yeah. And to your point about the live interaction, the other thing I love about it, we'll get a question, we'll answer the question, then they'll have a follow-up, which I like, because I'm like, oh yeah, maybe I didn't answer the question fully, or maybe it generated a related question. So really, really want to invite people to join us live. And Jimmy, in terms of the excitement level, right back at you. Your new studio looks great. I know you've invested a lot of time into that and you're still tweaking it all, but you look great. The studio looks great. This is only episode 1. Next episode, we're really going to start rocking and rolling.
Yeah, Andy, totally agree. This was a great first episode. We're out of time for today. I think we've covered it all. Andy, thank you so much. And thank you, our viewers and listeners, for joining us today. Our next episode in live stream will be Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern time. I invite you to attend the live stream and ask your questions about starting a fund or real estate syndication so that Andy and I can answer your questions in real time. Please be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube and hit that like button if you enjoyed today's show. And we'll be back next week with another episode.